character of their region. One of the big stories here is the huge gaps. Big difference across different regions of the state. Another aspect of that is educational attainment. And this graph shows, this table shows average earnings. This is for the U.S. as a whole, because we have better data for the U.S. as a whole for some of these things than for Michigan. Average earnings, there are lots of ways to slice and dice the data. I've chosen to try to slice them in a way that means that we're comparing apples to apples. So I've got people 45 to 54 who worked full-time year-round. That's a sort of a homogeneous group in the sense that they're all working full. You're not looking at part-time workers. Also, all of these people are almost all of them, they've finished their education, but they're not yet segueing toward retirement. So that's a sort of an apples-to-apples comparison. The big story here is that there is huge, whether you're talking about for women or for men, huge differences by educational attainment. And these differences are larger than they used to be. One of the biggest stories of the last 40 years is how those with only a high school diploma, those earnings have been flat. But if you've got a college degree, those earnings have grown very, very substantially. Next, I would say, the next slide that I want to say is, okay, we are a richer place than we used to be. Per capita income, adjusting for inflation, is twice what it was in the early 60s. So Michigan is not a poor place overall, although there are poor people in Michigan. But it is true that even though we're not poor, and even though our incomes are higher than they were 20, 30, 40 years ago, we have not grown as fast as the national average. This shows, here's 100%. This is per capita income in Michigan expressed as a percentage of per capita income for the U.S. as a whole. So if you're on this line, you're at the national average. And in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, we were above the national average in every year. Now we've been below the national average in most years. Since then, we've sort of bottomed out in recent years at about 13% below the national average. The black line is the trend that provides the best fit to these data, and it's not a very happy trend line. So that leads us to the question, what are the characteristics of the states that have done better? And the one characteristic that really stands out is educational attainment. So here is the same data that you just saw for Michigan, and then the same story for Massachusetts. 50 years ago, they had a much more highly educated population than we have, but it didn't translate into higher earnings for them. Now, they still have a much more highly educated population than we have, but their incomes are 50% higher than ours. And that's because the trend has been very favorable toward those states that have a highly educated population. Here's per capita income in the 50 states. You can see huge difference between Connecticut and Massachusetts at the top, Utah, Idaho, West Virginia, Mississippi at the bottom. And the big characteristic of all of these at the top is that they are among the highest in terms of educational attainment. All of these at the bottom, they're among the lowest, and Michigan is sort of in the middle of the pack. And so what have we done? We've made what I would say is a policy mistake. Now, I will note that this is controversial, and I will also say that I lay myself open to the criticism, well, I work for a university. I don't really care about this. I just want to slop at the trough, and I want more bread on my butter. But I can't disprove that if that's what you think is my motivation. But I'll tell you, as honestly as I can, I think it's been a mistake. What we've done in the last 9 years is we've reduced funding for all 15 of the four-year universities in the state of Michigan by about the same percentage. There are some folks who say, Doug Rothwell is one of them, we can't afford to maintain 15, we should close at least a few. So I decided to do the calculation, what if you started at the smallest one, which is Lake Superior? You zero out that account. How many would you have to zero out to be equivalent to the budget cuts of the last 9 years? You'd have to zero out Michigan Tech, Northern Michigan, Lake Superior State, Ferris State, Saginaw Valley State, Grand Valley State, U of M Flint, Oakland, U of M Dearborn, Eastern, Central, and Western. That's 12 of the 15. There's the list in alphabetical order. I don't say that because I advocate that as a policy. Certainly, I'm an employee of one of the 3 that's not on that list. And I don't want my smaller university friends to be closed down. But I say that trying to make clear that this has not been trimming around the edges. This has been a major change. Lots of emphasis on college education, but college is only the end of a very long program. So I would especially urge early childhood. And Tim Bartik from the Upjohn Institute, his book published last year, Investing in Kids, The Local Economic Development Effects of Early Childhood Education. Excellent book. I recommend it very highly. So it's the whole thing from preschool to PhD, from cradle to career, and I really think that's important. Now, in terms of jobs, if we do all the things that I think we ought to do to improve education, those investments in many cases won't bear fruit until 10, 20, 30 years from now. And it's true, that won't fix our job situation next week. But how did we get into the situation that we're in the first place? By not making the investments 20 years ago, 30 years ago, 40 years ago that would have borne fruit. And so I'm of an age where if I plant a tree this spring, I don't know whether I will live to rest in the shade of its leaves. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't plant a tree. And so I emphasize, yes, we have to have short-term strategies, and there's been talk from Julia and there will be talk from Larry in terms of short-term, but we also have to keep our eyes focused on the long-term prize. And one of the ones that I think that I keep saying wherever I go, it hasn't had much of an effect on policy yet, but I'll say it anyway, we in Michigan have a 19th century school year. And in fact, if you've followed the expose by the Center for Michigan, we even have less than that. We know many districts de facto have a school year of 170 or 160 days. What do they have in Australia? 200. What do they have in the Netherlands? 200. What do they have in South Korea? 220. We are the outlier. The U.S., we spend less time on task in terms of educating our kids than any other rich country. Yeah, we spend more time than in Central African Republic and Bolivia. But if you compare with the rich countries, we are the lowest, and I think it's a mistake. And I honestly, nobody's yet made the case against me. I haven't yet heard the argument, no, Professor Ballard, you're wrong. 180 days is plenty. We really need a long summer vacation so that our kids can forget so much of what they learned such that we can spend all of September and October reviewing what they forgot over the summer. But if you want to make that case, go for it. I want to also, here's a map of, this is Little Michigan, and this is Ontario. America's #1 trading partner is Canada. The #1 gateway to Canada is Michigan. I think we should keep it that way. And that means a whole bunch of things, including improving our transportation infrastructure. And I would second what Julie said about, I understand the politics. I understand that the Maroon family wants very much to maintain their monopoly. In terms of the economics, I think it's a slam dunk. We ought to build the bridge. I'm on the Economic Advisory Committee of something called the Council on Competitiveness. And I went to their meeting last December, and there were CEOs and chief technical officers and chief financial officers from a whole bunch of manufacturing companies. Every one of them said, if a foreign national gets a PhD in science or engineering in the United States, staple a green card to their PhD diploma. Now that's more of a federal issue. It's hard for Michigan, although maybe if the Supreme Court rules against Arizona, maybe we can have our own immigration policy, rules for Arizona, we can have our own immigration policy, and our immigration policy should be staple a green card to everybody who gets a PhD from U of M or MSU, let them stay. And I like to, Esther, do we have time? Mitch, do we have time for the song? Okay. So if you've seen my presentation before, you know that I've made it my mission to get Michigan singing again. So let's sing the state song. This is the first verse of the unofficial 1902 state song, Michigan, My Michigan, sung to "Oh Christmas Tree." You don't have to join me, but you really should. Okay. A song to thee, fair state of mine, Michigan, my Michigan. But greater song than this is thine, Michigan, my Michigan. The whisper of the forest tree, the thunder of the inland sea, unite in one grand symphony of Michigan, my Michigan. Thank you very much.